Next segment is a panel discussion on product management during War and Peace. So I would like to first invite the moderator for the panel discussion, Bala Girisaballa. Bala is an entrepreneur, advisor, and a business leader with global experience. He has over 20 years of extensive experience in technology, product strategy, innovation and ecosystem, and business development. So he's right now the CEO of Microsoft Accelerator India. Prior to Microsoft, he was in Zoho, where he headed innovation practice, and he was also with Yahoo, Oracle, Infosys, Alta Engineering, and Asian Paints. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bala Girisaballa. I would next like to invite Santanu Bhattacharya, who's the Senior Vice President at Delivery. Santanu is a seasoned mobile and social media executive with P&L sales, operations, product, and analytics experience across advertising and e-commerce ecosystems across India, emerging markets, and USA. In his new role as SVP at India's fastest growing $100 million plus startup Delivery, he solves cutting-edge problems to generate revenue, build efficiency, and improve margins. So prior to this, he was with Facebook, and prior to that, he founded Accelerator, world's first real-time cross-channel social media ad engagement platform. Ladies and gentlemen, Santanu Bhattacharya. Next, I'd like to invite Sridhar Iyengar. Sridhar Iyengar is the Vice President of Product Management at Zoho Corporation and is passionate about creating products for global markets. He has spent 2 decades building software products for SMB, enterprises, telecom, OEM, and service providers markets. Prior to Zoho, Sridhar was part of the TNET group at IIT Madras that built one of India's first indigenous commercial wireless telecom systems in the 90s. Please welcome Sridhar Iyengar. Next, I would like to invite Nitin, Seth, who is the Chief People Officer at Flipkart. Nitin brings with him over 2 decades of experience in entrepreneurship, strategy, consulting, operations management, and business process redesign. He leads the human resource function at Flipkart, India's largest online marketplace. Please welcome Nitin, Seth. And last but not least, I'd like to invite my friend Rajiv Srivatsa, Chief Operating Officer at Urban Ladder. Around 14 years of professional experience on the internet, mobile, supply chain areas with the right mix of business and technology. Rajiv Srivatsa has an excellent academic record as well. He is right now spearheading Urban Ladder towards becoming the #1 retailer for home decor products in India. Ladies and gentlemen, Rajiv Srivatsa. Over to you, Bala.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Ravi. Thanks, Ram, for the opportunity. And thank you, folks, who have come in today, braving the Bangalore traffic to reach this side of town. I have fantastic panelists here and a fantastic the keynotes that Pari delivered, shaking all of us up with respect to what's the future of product management. So we're going to take that. One of the themes around it is in terms of how's the product management look like during wartime and the peacetime. So let me just begin the proceedings with about a quick question. We are talking about wartime and the peacetime. So I want to know how many of you in your current professional life are do you think you are in the wartime versus peacetime? So all the wartime folks, put your hand up. Okay, so I don't even have to talk about peacetime anymore, right? So in personal life, no, let's not go there. So, well, I think the idea here is, when we were prepping up for the session here, we were talking about what is wartime and what is peacetime, and we had a war about that. So much so that we didn't know what to identify it as. So then later we said, let's change it to surgical strikes time and non-surgical strikes time. So it's primarily, I think, our product management is always probably at war, I guess, and we are always under threat. There's always something new going on with the organization. Even if there's nothing going on inside the organizations, you have to worry about what's happening. So it is a constant flux, the state of flux. Change is the only constant, and we've heard all of that. And primarily, what we need to really focus on is in terms of how do you define your role and what do you do during that particular inflection points or change period within your organization or within your context. So in that light, I have fantastic panelists who have been there, done that, in many times over, rather. And so I'm going to let each of them talk about their experience and background a little bit so that you guys get a context of where they are coming from when we have the discussion. We are going to probably discuss few areas of this aspect of product management, how it is evolving in various times. I would love to open up for Q&A intermittently rather than wait for the end. So please do raise your hand at any time if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will stop in between every 10, 15 minutes, and then we can take your questions. So I'm hoping the mics are around for the folks to ask their question. So with that, Nitin, I know you since like last time we spoke and now your portfolio has changed. So could you tell us a little bit about your background and what you are doing right now as of today morning?
Thanks, Bala. I think as of today morning, it has probably changed again.
Okay.
So I joined Flipkart 7-8 months back as the Chief People Officer. And then, over the last 3-4 months, my role has changed, and I'm now heading all what we call the strategy to execution function, which is corporate strategy, M&A, what we call strategy deployment, analytics, planning. So that's what I do with Flipkart. And before I joined Flipkart, 20 years, 14 years with McKinsey. In between, there was a 2-year of doing a venture where we probably overestimated the market size by 10,000 times or so much for McKinsey, kind of analytical smarts. And then last 6 years, I was the CEO for Fidelity International in India, and also heading the strategy for the international business. So that's my background.
Excellent, very varied experience, and certainly I'm sure you're having a lot of excitement and fun in the new one too, right?
Yeah, it's e-commerce industry is an absolute roller coaster ride, and yeah, look forward to sharing some experiences there.
So what does wartime mean for you versus peacetime in your experience? Across, you don't have to rely on your current role, but rather in your past role as well. How do you define it?
I think my current role and Flipkart and e-commerce industry, I think wartime resonates very, very deeply. The war for us is the competition in the marketplace. Last 12, 18 months, there has been this fierce competition, with in the e-commerce industry, which I'm sure all of you are very aware of, and I think that's a war. That's war as you ever kind of have one. And the way the industry works, there's also a lot of events. So, for example, this month is probably the peak of the war. Yeah. When we have all the Diwali sales, and it is it's like a sprint race. With counters all over the office, and you're logging up, tracking kind of sales numbers. So yeah, I think the competition for us is war. But I would also say that I was thinking about this war and peace, and I don't think it is that you are continuously at war. Even when there is war happening on some fronts, it is not that there is total war. You also have peace, and I think that's a theme I would like to explore with the panel, that this notion of constant war is also quite a damaging one, especially from a product management perspective, because what war implies is that you get very, very short-term focus, very, very execution focus, whereas you do need to build for the long term. You do need to develop kind of markets, develop products which will serve customer needs in interesting ways, and unless you have times of peace, that will not happen. Right. So while this war is a reality and is what we face, but I think it's also quite damaging. We have to be very conscious about it, because if we get into this war-mongering mode, it can be quite fatal as well.
Very interesting, because you're saying you have to plan for the peace times as well, otherwise you...
And you have to carve out peace times, because if you don't carve out peace times, and because this war thing gives you a big rush. Yeah. It's a big kind of energy rush. It's a passion rush, and you can get addicted to it. It's very necessary. You have to fight the wars. There is no getting away from it. But if that's all it is about, then you will not build for the long term.
Okay, thank you, Nitin. Rajiv, so tell us about your experience. Your journey has been with Urban Ladder as well.
it's been 4.5 years since we started Urban Ladder, and before that, of course, I've worked here with Ram and Ravi and Bala.
You know, feels like it's like an ex-Yahoo meetup
Yeah, it's
here.
an ex-Yahoo meet, sort of. So I was with Yahoo for 4 years, and before that, so largely always been in the digital side of things. Before Yahoo, I was with Cognizant for 4 years, and used to code in Infosys, stopped coding in 2004, big mistake of my life. In terms of, I think the big difference between, let's say, what I was doing in Yahoo and Urban Ladder is just, it's the number of challenges, and when you do your own thing, is just far more. And the big parts of what I learned at Yahoo, I've tried to implement at Urban Ladder in terms of the user experience and product management. And Urban Ladder is known for a fantastic digital product and great physical product too. So we've been very focused on the product side of things on Urban Ladder, on all sides of things. We've also been focused on experience design. Urban Ladder has one of the highest net promoter scores in the whole of the country for any business, and across the whole of the world for any business. We have a net promoter score of 0.85. And the best of brands have around 0.6 to 0.56. So I think a lot of what we've done at Urban Ladder is to make sure that we do the basics right. And to that extent, wore different hats in terms of everything from marketing to merchandising to user experience to customer service to off late really recruiting a senior management team. And I think that's sort of a big drag in terms of the time, but a very necessary drag. So I would say, that's what I do at Urban Ladder, and how the digital experience has helped in Urban Ladder is to make sure that the digital product is something that we can be proud of, because it's got one of the cleanest UIs. It's got one of the best apps out there on, the catalog app, as well as what we have done on AR and VR and a bunch of other stuff. So a lot of that has helped not just as a product, but to drive business. A lot of our so far sales come from our AR app. A lot of the 35% of our sales come from an app. And you would think 2 years back when we launched a furniture app, who would buy furniture through an app on the mobile phone, right? So a lot of the work that's gone in the last 2 to 3 years has helped us. And our focus on digital, on service, on brand, on physical product has gotten us to where we are. Having said that, I think the challenge for the next 3-4 years, if you want to target an IPO and if you want to target profitability in the next 2 years, is to make sure that we work, we set up on this good work. We just pivoted to be a brand. So that essentially means that we are listing on Amazon, we are listing on Flipkart, we're going offline. So we are going the whole 360-degree hog. So that's a big push for us in the next few years.
Very interesting. So you guys are like focusing on that. So tell me about it. You've been, you are a product manager. I was going to say you were a product manager, but you are. It looks like you've kind of done a lot of functions there. Looking back with the keynote earlier, where there's a lot of focus on the data, the artificial intelligence, and all that stuff. What is the mix between data orientation to intuition orientation? Has it changed, and if so, how?
If I knew the answer to this, I would be in a far better shape. This is one of the biggest debates we always have, and if I go by data, we wouldn't have started an online furniture business, because when we started, there was zero. So there was an intuition, and I think as we go along, we just take a lot more decisions based on data. I think that fundamentally makes us take less risks. And to that extent, I would have preferred that we used intuition a lot more. And but this is one of the biggest debates that we keep having, and it's one of the trickiest ones, because just going back to that example. But we use a ton of data pretty much in every single thing, because if you bring out a decision, and we have a culture of decentralized decision making, and the only way that's going to work is if it's based on data. So we have a huge focus on data in terms of pretty much every decision we make, right from the metrics that translate to what each one's KPIs are. But at the same time, I would just personally prefer that we did a few more decisions based on intuition.
Intuition, okay. Thank you. So we'll come back to that. I think this is going to be an emergent thought process with respect to how things are changing. So Shantanu, I always wanted to tell you, introduce you with this line, which is to say that if you torture data enough, it'll confess to anything. So to that extent, Shantanu's day job is to torture data, right? So, and he does a good job. You will see that he'll torture us too today. But with that, Shantanu, ex-Facebook, SolarX, and now with delivery, doing fantastic work. I always follow his blogs, or I don't know what you call it. You could publish it as a paper too. So please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey.
Thank you, Bala, for the introduction, and thank you for giving me an opportunity, Ram, to speak here today. It's interesting. You said delivery, and let me start with that. That's my current gig.
Which is to torture data, right?
Yes. The theme is the same theme, right?
Waterboarding them.
Exactly. Torturing the data, but the players change. So at delivery, what we had done in the past year, I've been here for about a year plus, a bit over a year. If you think of and Nitin, you know that, right? We carry your packages, we take it between, Kashmir and Kanyakumari. A package originates in Delhi, it gets delivered to your house in Bangalore. In India, it's a fascinating journey because what happens, a third of the addresses are wrong. If you look at the address pin code combination, a third of the addresses in India are wrong. People write addresses in any ways they want. For example, I myself, where I work, delivery building, being a delivery company, our own pin code is wrong on the building. And as a result, what has happened, the new houses that are coming out on the street also have wrong pin code because they assume that we being a delivery company, we have got our pin code wrong, right? And therefore everyone else copies us. That's number one. We are beside Ramada. Beside in India, beside in English means either left side or the right side or maybe behind sometime. Beside in India can mean anywhere between two gullies behind it, next to the canal, right? People write addresses in terms of points of interest, which is behind Domino's Pizza, next to SBI ATM, and so on. In Northeast, which is where we're expanding now, so we call that POI, points of interest. In Northeast, we have a new definition of POI, which is person of interest. Dobi Thorpa, Gangtok, Sikkim. Now, Dobi expects that delivery to know wherever she is and deliver the package to her. Because, of course, in Gangtok, everyone knows that Dobi sits in the main market next to the pawn shop. How would delivery not know sitting in Delhi that Dobi Thorpa lives in Gangtok? So we are solving these fascinating problems. So when I came in, there are two thoughts. One, we will wait till we Indians write good proper address, and we'll deliver it to the right address. Now that's God's act. That's not going to happen. So what we built is a machine learning system that has enabled us to get 40% better productivity in the last mile. It actually gets us to within certain distance of a house in the entire country at a 95% accuracy. Comparably, Google gets us the same dirty data written and sent to Google, only gets about 30% or so. So there's a huge quantum jump in productivity there. Prior to this, I was torturing data in Facebook and trying all of you to get to do two things. Spend more time on your Facebook feed, put more content, and do more likes and comments. That was my job, and we did a pretty good job of it. In a year that I was there, for the emerging market, that's the 400 million users, anywhere from Brazil to Papua New Guinea, we had increased the content production by a factor of 2, which is a per person per day, which is a pretty impressive task. And we had increased engagement, which is your likes, shares, and so on, by a factor of 3 within a year. And we'll talk about how you do some of that as a wartime PM in the subsequent questions. Prior to that, I was looking at Pari's slides, and I said I started a AI social engagement company about 6 years early. In 2009, we started that. It did a lot of good work. At one point in time, we were being compared with IBM Watson in our ability to process conversations, short conversations. But it sort of fell through a spectacular or not so spectacular acquisition bid from Google, and that's all history. So it's been 10 years in the data, and I would say data, AI, analytics in that space, and how to use that to build awesome kick-ass products.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Shantanu. Sridhar, so you've been with Zoho from the day it began?
96,
right?
yes.
Yeah, so could you just walk us through your journey and what you...
Sure. So, I mean, I'm part of the product management team. I'm a product manager at Zoho. But product management kind of is different at different organizations. So here at Zoho, the product manager is also, he's in fact also the head of the product as in the product owner. So there are a lot more responsibility apart from the classical product management definition that one would come across.
So what would they be? If you
For
could,
example, so if you're
give
the
an
product
example.
owner, so for example, in terms of say heading the pre-sales or the marketing,
I see.
in terms of how the product adoption goes is part of your responsibility. So in addition to the usability, the product development also will report to you. So that's a little bit different from how, so that way you have more accountability and you basically empower the product manager to, get shit done. So,
Okay.
so when people talk about Zoho, typically our CRM or the business productivity applications come to mind. But what a lot of people don't know is, as a company, we came from a very different background. So Zoho started off as a software provider. We built software, network management software for telecom and networking equipment vendors. And that is very different from what you see today. So that period for us from 96 to 2000, 2001 was where we were doing only that. And around 2001, we were challenged. I mean, that's kind of the background I want to set here, which will lead us into the wartime discussion. So wartime for us, in fact, personally speaking, I think there are only two. I would classify this as wartime and not peacetime. It's basically preparing for wartime.
Okay.
So you're either fighting a war or you're preparing to fight the next war, right? So that's how I would define it. But then for us, when we were serving the telecom OEM market in late 90s, what happened is a lot of our customers were startups, telecom and networking startups. And everything was fine. We were building, products to sell to them. And up until 2001, everything was fine. And around that time, the telecom, two things happened. .com bubble burst, telecom bubble burst, which basically left us with, all our customers were disappearing. So that was the biggest inflection point for us.
That's right.
Which is basically I'll use that to set the context for the wartime. So that was the wartime moment for us.
I see. Thank you very much. So coming to the, thanks a lot for the walking us through the journey. It's very interesting to see, on one side, and you guys are sitting on both sides of the spectrum here, I see. So on one side, Nitin is saying, this whole wartime lingo is pretty bad. We have to create our peace times as part of the wartime. And on your side, you're saying we have to prepare for the war times when you are not even at war. But I understand. I think we are both probably talking about similar things, but in different lights. So I want to understand. So what one thing we can tell is that a rapid change is probably considered as war. Industry pressure or changes and disruption in the industry or competitive landscape can be construed as a war kind of thing. So what changes? How does a role of a product management change or transform when you are going through that period of change within your organization? Could you just describe or characterize that?
Sure. I asked my head of product management exactly this question.
Okay.
And, he described it in a very interesting way that, war, we become like water, which kind of flows, wherever there are kind of cracks and they have to be filled up. So wartime, is, whatever needs to get done. There is, very sharp kind of execution focus. It's, more near-term set of things, that need to get done. So is, a lot more of, general kind of management role that I think Sridhar was also alluding to. I think that's certainly the case for us in Flipkart. And peace is more of a long-term orientation, more of classical product management, which is figuring out kind of white spaces and, how do we build something, for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I would characterize it. War, short term, very sharp execution focus, and peace, long term, a lot more of innovation focus.
Does it change with whether you are the one mounting the war versus you are kind of the receiving it of the war? What do you think? Rajiv, what's your view on that?
I actually have a very different view on this.
Okay.
I actually think if there is peacetime, you're just staring at a big wartime that's coming up.
So it's like the calm before the storm.
It's like a big calm before the storm, because I go back and rewind to Yahoo, and we were all, thinking we were in peacetime, but honestly, we were just looking at the wartime, and probably the Nokia guys probably felt that, right? And as a startup, unless I'm a Google or a Facebook which has a cash cow, I think we are always in wartime, right? And this is a bit more in hindsight, because in the first year and a half, we just didn't have enough money. So it was just wartime to get any kind of talent or get any stuff done. Then we had some money, but hey, we had to convince really smart engineers and product managers to join an e-commerce company. So that was again wartime. So we couldn't get stuff, the kind of stuff that we would ideally like to have done. 2.5 years later, we got enough money. We got a reasonable brand built in the space, and we were willing to pay. But hey, Flipkart and Ola were paying 2x. So it was so difficult to get stuff done. And the reason why I'm saying this is because the kind of stuff that you can get done, if you have that mindset that, hey, one, you super brutally prioritize and there are 3 big buckets here, right? One, you think, and in the last 1.5 years, a lot of the companies, when funds were flowing around, thought that it was peacetime. But hey, that was just an impending wartime. One, I think you just get distracted. You recruit like crazy, you go after too many metrics, and you think that, you can do all this cool stuff. But your core metric, which probably required years of work, which the kind of Google and the Amazons had 15, 17 years of work, you thought that's just easy, but that was not. So you could have had to put all of your 25 engineers on one thing, get your revenue or get your supply chain sorted. That's probably what you should have done, right? So going after one single metric, it just always helps. Instead of going after 3 metrics, splitting the team of 25 into 3 pods, 8 each, going after these 3, that doesn't work. 2, in terms of just the culture, when you think you're at wartime, there's just a lot more energy, a lot more concentrated energy. I'm not talking surgical strikes here, I'll come to that. But just the mindset of the team when it works in the wartime, there are 2-week sprints. Friday better be every alternate Friday better be a burning deadline date, and there is no skipping that, right? That just sort of starts dissipating in a peacetime. The third one is, how do you evangelize and how do you create that culture of decision making, which is decentralized? And again, that's where the surgical strikes come, where I don't think you need to be in surgical strike zone. And that's like super wartime, right? Where let's say one person has to take the decision because one person's neck is on the line. Probably that's the CEO. And that's too extreme. But here you make sure that people are taking those decisions quickly and moving on. As long as everyone is aligned to the metric and everyone is aligned to the culture, that's absolutely fine. For me, as a startup, till you're profitable or till you're public market listed, and even there, I think there's competition, you're always in wartime, and that really helps in hindsight.
I think fantastic points around prioritization.
Can I just add to
Yeah,
something?
absolutely.
Yeah. So, just reflecting on what Rajiv was saying, and probably there is, this whole definition of wartime and peacetime, and always at war, and needing some periods of kind of Pax Romana, where you have some peace. I think there is some correlation with your size as well, and your kind of what stage of your life journey you are in. Because when I reflect on Flipkart, and I think our DNA still is very what Rajiv was describing, which is always at war and getting the organization galvanized and really focused. The big billion, the BBDs, those sale events and things like that, just galvanize the organization like nothing else. But you also kind of realize that when you're a 40,000 people organization, and then if you're always at war, it is a very huge drain. Then just sustaining, when we were a couple of thousand people versus when we are at 40,000 people, this whole notion being always at war, and that is the way we work, becomes a lot more difficult.
Okay.
And in terms of the way we have built our product management DNA over a period of time, we've also ended up importing a lot of people from much larger companies, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, and their definition of war and peace and their preference for the mix of war and peace is also very different.
I see. Okay.
So, even when I say war, but we are trying to carve out some periods of peace. that for them is also quite unsettling because their need for peace is a lot more.
Okay.
So maybe that's also something to reflect on, that it is, it's not maybe a generic answer, and the word startup.
So, does that correlate with the horizon at which you think? Maybe the piece you are talking about is also maybe correlates to, I'm thinking a little longer term. Therefore,
Absolutely,
that
absolutely.
correlates to the piece part of it, right?
We're also trying to move from kind of weekly, monthly to quarterly to
Got it.
annual.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know how much we'll go beyond annual, but I think it is also your situation.
Right.
It is where you are on that kind of maturity curve, on that the way you will define your battles and your kind of what's maybe a good mix for you could probably be quite different.
Got it. Shantanu, any comments on this? You also mentioned prioritization as a very critical part during the the wartime. I mean, when we say wartime, I'm synonymizing with rapid change that we are talking about to what Nitin said. Well, what's your experience been with both with Facebook, which is right now a large company, with Delivery, which is a small company? Must be definitely a lot of contrast in the way they look at the horizons.
Yes. So I take a slightly contrarian view. This is one of the fun things I get to do, take a contrarian view and, sort of come across with different point of views and learn from other people, right? I would almost disagree directly saying that there is a peacetime at all. My former employer, which is now a large company with about 15,000 employees, it is always at war. Every day is a war. Every single day is a market share. So I'll give you an example. The contrast of the mindset. So for example, in your market, there are 2 new startups who came up with new products. If you are a peacetime PM, you write a 41-page memo to the management saying that, hey, this is a validation of our ideas, the market seems to be growing. If you're a wartime PM, you say, shit, 2 more competition, we are going under, let me watch my back, right? That's a very different set of mindset. It always starts there. Second thing is that even for companies like Facebook or Delivery, which is sort of in a comfortable position, the war never goes away. The war is not about your competition, not about your market, not about anything else. The war is about 3 things. It's giving your consumers new choices about getting things better, getting things done better, faster, and cheaper. As companies, if we can figure those out, if you cannot figure those out, someone else will. That's the war all about. It's all about giving the consumers choice. Today, what is happening is in the past, 15, 20 years I've been PM, I'm seeing a rapid change of the power. The power is shifting from the companies, which is to push out products. It's a my assets, my products out view, to consumers, right? Where they have a choice to have hundreds of products in this space, in any space, and figuring out which one they're going to accept. So that shift is essentially driving from what used to be called peacetime PM. You take a bunch of products, you'll build features on that, you'll release them in a certain time scale, you have a certain number of set customers, and they'll accept it. I've done it in my life, for 5-7 years of my life. But the shifting of the power to the consumer, which was actually pioneered by the internet company, and now it's everywhere, right, is driving that change. Like, for example, today, the Paris slides, Paris not on the audience, talked about, companies like Uber and Tesla, which is solving your transportation problem. They're not building cars. So if you think from a mindset of a BMW's product manager, they're building cars, they need to push it out to the customers. Uber's view is providing a cheaper, faster, and better transportation solution to the consumers. Very different mindset. And the world is shifting towards that very, very rapidly. So the faster we accept that this is going to be a battle, a war, for providing things faster, better, and cheaper to the consumers, we sort of all win in the long run. And the second thing is about long run versus short run.
But just to interrupt you, you mentioned that you should, from a mindset point of view, you articulate differently if you're thinking as though you're in a war versus you're in peace. But to Nitin's point, maybe that war lingo galvanizes people. Was it Nitin or Rajiv? One of them said it galvanizes people, right? So it kind of makes people wake up and force them to act and not, kind of, it probably forces them to move out of their inertia. Maybe there's a good thing about that, right? So what's wrong with that?
No, that's what I'm saying. So you have to have, that was my point was, the world has moved that way. You are a wartime PM, whether you like it or not.
No, but you said, you're from your metrics point of view, oh my God, there's like two competitors, I'm sinking, kind of. You don't want to foster that type of mindset. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't want to.
But what's wrong with that? It probably forces people to shake them and, move into action, isn't it?
No, that's what I'm saying. So I'm taking, sorry, my apologies if I said it that way. I am always for a wartime PM, which is...
Okay. You're for the latter, not for the...
Not for the former.
Okay,
I'm just explaining how the shift has happened.
Got it.
And my last sentence was, for better or worse, we better figure out that the power has shifted to the consumers.
Right.
And it is going to be the war, whether they like it or not. It's going to be war for figuring out how to do things better, faster, and cheaper.
Got it.
And that was... So I've been a wartime PM for like 10 years now.
Got it. Yeah.
The bias, actually the metrics part, right? It forces you to, just echoing what Rajiv said, it forces you to think very, very lucidly and very, very clearly about what your metrics are.
So it looks like, what I'm hearing is it's a mind game. You kind of put yourself and get out of the funk that you're in peacetime, because peacetime doesn't benefit anybody. Wartime kind of makes you super focused, except that you have to think in different horizon with respect to war, is what I think, we are kind of saying. Sridhar, in your experience, both in the, in the long process of like .com era to here, how does this whole notion of wartime, peacetime part of it work?
Right. So, someone once said that sometimes you have to wage a war to ensure peace, right? So, and that's the same in business as well. So, in our own case, right? So, when we transitioned from, so here's the situation. So, we had most of our customers going out of business. We were profitable at that time. So, in front of us, we had this. Then majority of the product revenues were from one single product, which had basically 200 people, 200 to 300 people on it. And this product was catering to the developers. And from there on, what we did is we took the technology, framework, learning, all that, applied it to a different market, which was enterprise IT. So we transitioned from a telecom network management to enterprise IT management, which is still a very profitable business for us. It's called the Manage Engine brand. So what we did was, we transitioned from like a single 200, 300 product team to 20 different smaller teams with 20 different products. And then the other thing that we did differently was, instead of selling to developers alone, we started, this new market allowed us to sell to end users. And that's where the role of product management, usability, and design became very, very difficult, very important. So, that happened when we were kind of faced with this dilemma, which, questioned our own existence. And so the biggest challenge there was the cultural part. So when I say cultural, it's basically people and mindset. So our own people had to adapt to that culture of building framework type of product, go from there to end user type of product, where users would look for usability, users would look for design.
How did this come about? Is it like a top-down decision, or is it like, decentralized, somewhere people figured out that this cultural shift is needed?
Right. So the what to do part, which market to enter. For example, we had all this, technology people, learning, all that. Going to new market was a top-down approach. But then how to do it, what was a bottom-up approach?
Okay, got it.
So, and that basically allowed us to go from a centralized structure to a decentralized structure, which helped us scale.
Got it, sounds good. So I want to ask you a quick question here, because I think there is, in a time of change, and there's a lot of things changing, so there are some decisions which there are two ways you behave. You kind of pull back all the decision making to top-down approach. When we talk about war times, one of the two can happen. Or we actually empower, and then let people make decisions, because you want to quickly go wherever it is and fix problems. Typically, how do companies end up reacting? Because each of them have their own pros and cons. And the reason, there's another context in which I'm asking this question. Most in most situations, product managers do not find themselves in the top side of it. They find themselves somewhere in the middle side of it. So they have to react and act quickly in the wartime scenario, but they may not actually have the level of authority to push down decisions. So depending on what do you guys, your experience has been, I just want to get some feel for, in your organization, has it been in a wartime situation, top-down decisions and then people figure out how, or the decisions were decentralized? Nitin?
See, you never have only one type of decisions, Bala. So, I think it's again, I would say, over simplistic to say that your decisions are only top-down or they're only kind of bottom-up. There are some decisions that, we make in a very, very top-down fashion. So, I think Rajiv, mentioned about, focus and metrics. And I think that, we drive in a very top-down fashion. That, if this is the war and,
this is the metric.
This is the metric and this is what we are focusing on. That's very, very top-down. But, within that, if, the, sale is happening and, you are touching, volumes, which are sometimes 1000x, your kind of BAU load, and there are things, which break, and then they have to be solved on a very real-time basis, then product managers, do that very, very, in a very decentralized fashion.
Okay.
Because, just like even a 5 minute of downtime, the impact of that at our volumes can be catastrophic. So you cannot, for something like that, you cannot work in a top-down fashion.
Okay.
So I think, we, given that, over the 9 years of our history, we have pretty much been in this war mode. I think we have now developed these reflexes, and I would say there are the focus very, very, I would say, top-down.
Okay.
But the kind of the day-to-day
execution part of it is
I
where
think it's
there's
very,
a lot of,
very
okay.
decentralized.
Okay. Rajiv?
It's somewhat similar, and as I said, when you're always at wartime, you need a culture of decentralized decision making because you can't have all the decisions top down. The culture will just go for a toss. So to that extent, as long as the leadership of a team is working together and the metrics are super clear, decision making still rests with the team. Then there is the next level, which is surgical strike zone, right? And you put that really well. At that time, what happens is, there are some situations where only the founders of the board really know the situation. And giving too much of a negative feel across the board gives a very, it doesn't warrant because the team goes into a negative zone. In that case, what you do is really step up and prioritize one more level brutally. Now, that cannot happen in isolation, right? Because in that time, what you do is over-communicate. Over-communicate in a very positive way. For example, with the number of resources we have, for example, last 3 months, we have had to, we want to deprioritize things which are the cool stuff, right? Engineers like working on cool stuff. But now you have a set of metrics which are not improving, let's say the service level or the margins, right? And we need more people to just focus on that. So instead of 6 people working on 4 things, we want 12 people working on 2 things. Now, maybe the second one of those 2 things is not the coolest of stuff compared to the 4th thing. Now, how do you communicate? How do you get those engineers to suddenly 1 quarter just shift here and the next 6 months you promise something to them? So I think over-communication is super important when you do the surgical strikes mode. And the hope is that you get back to wartime. As I said, there's no peacetime. But you don't know. You can't plan for that. So to that extent, I would say surgical strike zone, it is very top-down decision-making, but super over-communication so that people really understand as to why they're doing that.
Got it. Shantanu, what's your experience? Where do you draw the line?
See, to me, what is important, there are a couple of things that are important, right? One is getting your metrics right on the top level, right? And that can have a devastating consequences of the life of a company. So I'll give you an example of 2 companies in 2008. One of them was Facebook, the second one was MySpace. MySpace always used to report in their filings the number of registered users. Facebook never spoke about number of registered users, it always spoke about monthly active users. Very, very simple distinction, and no one really understood why Facebook would never talk about installed user base, and MySpace would always talk about the number of installed users. It turns out what Facebook was focused on, 2 things, right? Was in engagement and retention. It knew it in the longer run that will essentially grow the market, while MySpace focused on something which could be easily gamed. You could do installs, right? You could get vanity installs, which people would people would not use in the long run, but you would look good for a while. So having honesty and clarity around what metrics you're driving for should come from the top level. And the product managers, so I come from organizations where there's a huge PM bias. The product managers, they are at the top, actually at the table, deciding in the management and helping them understand why certain metrics are the ones that you should be driving for and what are the rationales behind it. Because you get that wrong, you have the entire company going in the wrong direction. That was one. Second, on the execution side, it has to be decentralized. We no longer have the option or the luxury of deciding what experiments you're going to run. It's all about experimentation. It's all about figuring out consumer choices, especially on the internet space, and it's spreading in other areas also. You do not have the luxury of being able to dictate that what are the hundreds of experiments one would be running and which one would be succeeding. In fact, you have no a priori knowledge about what would succeed anyway. So there, the important thing is the speed and the volume. So one of the things that we did, it looked like after the fact that it was done that way, but it wasn't. After the fact, we are all wiser. In a year I was at Facebook on the emerging market, we ran over 250, maybe close to 300 experiments, 6 to 7 experiments every week. Guess what? Half of them failed, complete failure. They produced negative results. And that's a, toss of a coin. It always works out that way. But of the other 150, 1% were super experiments that yielded 2 to 3% of extra engagement. 5% were between 0.5% and 2% of extra engagement, and so on. But what happened, because we ran so many of them, eventually the volume overcame everything, and we grew 2x at the end of the year, right? So the ability to run literally large volume of experiments in a short time scale and being able to make a decision about go, no go is always decentralized. It's very hard to control it at the top level. So it's a mix of both.
Yep. Sridhar, any comments on it? You did mention about how Zoho went through this process, right?
Right. So, to pick up on Rajiv's point on over-communication or communication is important, you almost have to do that to get everybody on board with the vision, right? And then, the one reason why you have to let people figure it out, irrespective of wartime or peacetime, in terms of execution and how to get there, but then constantly work with them, right? Because that's the only way you can scale up the business. So that's one thing. The second thing is this entire peacetime, right, or the time between two wars, is the time you get to basically build your differentiators, build your moats, as they say, right? You have to, that moat can be on the product side, on the design side, on pricing side, anything. So that is the luxury that you get to basically prepare for the next war, right? So in our own case, so when we got into enterprise IT management, so on one side, we had the set of teams focused on winning that market. On the other side, what we realized is the emergence of cloud could be a threat to this market. So if cloud computing picks up in a big way, this business could be threatened. And if we wanted to stay relevant for the next 10 or 20 years,
you got to prepare for it.
Yeah. Right. And that's the around 2004, 2005 time frame, we decided that cloud is going to come, no matter what.
That came out as a very good and successful bet for Zoho, right? So it completely changed your
So that was again a bet, and that was considered, you could kind of say that was peacetime for us.
Peacetime, yeah.
Because that change was not thrust upon us at that time.
That on. Yeah.
So it's always easy to deal with the change when it's not thrust upon you, when you have the luxury to choose to disrupt a market.
Got it.
So incidentally, other companies like Google and Microsoft also chose that. But then that gave us the time to, build up that
take
business.
on. Very, very interesting. I'm going to pause here, see if you have any questions, comments before we move. Yes.
Second, just one sentence. And today's peacetime topics have a knack of becoming tomorrow's wartime stories. It was YouTube versus Facebook videos.
Right.
On more recently, Indus Water Treaty, peacetime success, now we are talking about war
Yeah,
over it.
no, yeah,
So
absolutely. Good point.
It changes very, very rapidly.
Change.
And you have
I
no-
really like the way Sridhar put it. Peace time equals the time between two wars. So, any questions, comments, and then we'll move on to the next exciting topic about do we need product managers? So, okay.
Yeah, this question is from Kunal. I'm Kunal. I'm the founder of an edtech startup. This question is for Mr. Shantanu. It's more of based on how you deal with data, because since you have said that you are facing a lot of problems in addresses and all. Similarly, I am facing a lot of problems in where students come in and pose different kind of questions, academic questions. So how do you deal with that and the creative part of it? Because here we are not only just dealing with data, it's more of moving towards the creative AI. So can you tell me any modules or help in that regard? Thank you.
I'm not sure if this really relates to the topic here. Shantanu is available offline. If you want to catch up with him, he can give you a lot more than you can consume. Is that okay? Yeah.
I'll talk to you after.
Yeah. Catch him soon after this.
Hi, this is Murli. I'm co-founder of Voices. We are building a software for product managers. So one of the questions that I have is, when you are in a war zone or war time, whom do you listen to? Like customers or competition or your internal teams?
Who do you what?
Listen to.
Listen
or
to.
in terms of
Who do you focus on?
exactly.
Customers, competition, employees, investors,
Yeah.
or just go home?
There is always only one answer to it, customers.
That's right. Okay.
Like there is no other answer. The reason why competition is breathing down on your neck is you didn't focus on customers enough earlier. I don't think there is any other answer to this particular question, ever, like ever.
Yeah. And
Otherwise,
what-
he'll wage war with you if you have another answer. Anybody has any other opinion on that?
I have a different take on that.
Okay.
So we tend not, see, it's like this. So you have to get your antennas up and catch what's in the air, right? And then apply your own judgment to see what is the direction you want to go, and then have the conviction to go about it, right? So which means that sometimes we've ignored what customers said, specific customers said, in favor of the larger market. So we look at markets instead of customers, then you're kind of not dependent on one or two customers who basically on which your business is dependent on. So depending on the market, in our experience, as it kind of reduces the dependency and diversifies your,
Let me qualify my customer point. It is never that you just listen to what customers are saying and just do that. My first point about intuition on where the market is going is again customers. It's again not about competition. So if you can't make that bet, then also you're going to fail. So, the way they thought about cloud is a great example, right? So customers for me is the market, and it's about also looking at the next 3 years or 4 years and what that's going. But it's still customers and not competition.
Got it.
I'll add one practical point to it. Our customers, markets and everything are different filters. What Sridhar just said is a great point. You should be keeping your antennas up and listening to everyone. I can tell you who not to listen to. Your investors have zero idea about your business, so please don't listen to them. There have been way too many companies, startups in the world that have been destroyed by their investors' great ideas. Really don't listen to them. Just one advice from an entrepreneur.
That's very valuable. Just one small follow-up.
Take their money though.
A small follow-up there. Typically in a lean product management that we follow, right? And we pivot. So what's the usual, from your experience, is it a good time to pivot during wartime or peacetime?
Pivots, good time, whether it's wartime pivots or peacetime pivots. By the way, yours was a peacetime pivot,
Or
right?
actually the
Zoho.
ideal time usually.
Ideal time. The Zoho was a peacetime pivot.
there is no ideal time.
There's no
my
ideal
opinion.
time.
It's
Correct.
very context specific, and the pivot is determined by.
No, maybe we should answer this question a little differently.
Okay.
Look at all the pivots you guys have gone through in your experience and see what characterized that pivot. Is that a wartime pivot or a peacetime? I'm guessing wartime pivots are forced upon by the market, and peacetime pivots are you force it. So as you're seeing where the market is shifting. But I want to you guys talk about it.
Yeah,
Couple of
actually,
examples.
where is more probability of success?
Not so sure if that's a. You have any
Don't know yet.
comments? Don't know yet. Yeah, still in work in progress. right?
Well, there's another thing, right? It also depends on the type of company you run. So if you're looking at, for example, if you're a company who's going to exit in 2 years, and you see the next impending war in, say, 5 to 7 years, then, it's irrelevant.
Yes, correct.
I
War
mean,
after
so
you're
that's a
done.
war you're not even going to fight.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so should we move on to whether we all have jobs or not? Okay.
I have a question. Hi, my name is Vinod, and my question is to Sridhar. So you said like in 2001, you shifted your focus to enterprise IT solution, and in 2004, you looked at cloud computing as a threat, and what do you see today as a threat or as a war?
I guess you'll know in a few years.
Sorry?
We've still got our antennas up.
Okay.
So that's
Still
the
figuring
short
it out.
answer.
Okay. What do you guys see? I mean, that's a good question. Maybe we should ask others too. What do you guys see as as the next threat?
I would not, so I'll take this one. I would
Okay,
not call
we'll
it a
walk
threat.
from that side then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not call it a threat, but what will change the world very, very rapidly is what Pari's talk was all about. It's going to be all about AI. If you do not understand how AI is going to change your world, you will be surprised by someone else who will use it in your industry and build a product that's, that will just leave you in the dust. So you need
To some extent, I think the right way of looking at AI is it's foundational. It's not like an industry-specific phenomena, right? It's like it's your internet, like the way it's internet
It was like
is.
internet
Yes.
on the cloud. So
That's right,
That's
yeah.
one thing. You need to understand it.
Very
You
true,
need to
very
understand
true.
the details of it, how it's going to impact your
Got
industry,
it.
and how people will be thinking about it.
Got it.
And every industry will be impacted.
Rajiv?
It doesn't matter.
For me, it's VR.
VR.
Next 7 years, I think it'll be where mobile phones are today. It's going to disrupt every single industry from education, travel, pretty much every industry. You can just sit at home and do stuff. Retail, for sure. Experiences, sports, like every single industry. It's going to be probably bigger than mobile phones today.
Wow. Nitin?
Probably slightly different take. I was just reflecting on Rajiv's comment about, it always has to be about the customer. War and peace. I think that's absolutely the right kind of way of thinking about it, but I'm not sure if that's what happens. I think maybe it goes to definition of a war. Maybe we are defining wars differently. At least my experience, my view is that, when it's a war, you actually tend to forget the customer. When it's war, you kind of get into a very kind of execution focus. And I think, one of the challenges for, at least the Indian e-commerce industry, as I see it, is that we are all so war obsessed that, we are actually fighting for a defined and a relatively small pie of the overall market as opposed to growing the market. E-commerce is still, 2%, 2.5% of total retail. And, we are largely our propositions and, what we're focused on is the SEC A1, which is 5 million of 400 million urban customers. That is where largely, the war is happening. And because, we are all in such a war, mode, and it's as I said earlier, I think war is an addiction. You just, then as an organization, you lose your ability to work in any other way. You end up focusing on that. But if you don't go beyond that, you're not going to grow the market. You may say, a customer, but you're not really doing that. You're not really going to there are many Indias. There are many Indias, which are dramatically different from each other in terms of their, what their needs are, what their consumption spend is. And if you're in a war mode, I think your ability of going beyond truly understanding the customer needs and therefore developing products, proposition, which will grow the market significantly, I think goes down. And that to me is a huge challenge.
John, yeah, I think that's very interesting point you make.
I just have one thing on that gentleman's question, in response to that. One of the things that we see, as part of the crystal ball gazing is when it comes to business applications, offerings will get much more, integrated in terms of offering this amazingly seamless user and customer experience to business users. So in that sense, that will drive consolidation in the business applications. And a lot of people are doing that. So again, as a company, if you are playing in that space, you have to build moats or differentiators. One of the things we have done in that context is the portfolio of business applications that we have built
Right.
is quite broad.
Okay.
That's an example of.
Kind of gives you that.
So I want to, talk about this particular point, right? Because
Yeah.
obviously, the consumer versus, the other pieces. There are two aspects that I think get confused in wartime, peacetime versus just how product culture and engineering culture is, right? Now, product culture and engineering culture are who you are, what your team is, what your vision is, and what's the kind of people you have. That, for me, irrespective of whether it's war, surgical strike, peace, whatever it is, says a few things. Now, the level you can actually get deep into the consumer insight and predict as to what and where the consumer is going and make those, whether intuition, whether data, all of that is a mix of it, calls and win that market, which is what literally Facebook did or Apple did with the smartphone, is still deep consumer thinking. Steve Jobs didn't go and ask what you need in the iPhone, but he did deep consumer insight. So for me, that's just a product culture point irrespective.
Right.
Now, how you build products which will last, if you believe your company is going to last for 10, 20 years, you better have an engineering culture, whether in war, peace, or surgical strike mode, that builds for the long term and not build something that's going to fail at the next 2x.
Right.
So if it's going to take 2 months instead of 2 weeks, so be it. You're still in wartime, it's still 2 months. But you're building something which is going to last longer, which is going to serve millions of customers and not just 1,000 customers. So again, for me, that's product culture and engineering culture. It's got, in my mind, nothing to do with as
War
much
and the
war
peace
or
sort of
peace.
So I think that's great perspective. But this level of juggling between your long-term, building for the long term versus managing tactically for the short term is a really tough skill, right? So it's a very hard skill for people to develop. It's a lot of intuition there, a lot of zooming in and zooming out, ability to manage different stakeholders who are coming from different angles. Does that characterize the product management function? I'm guessing a lot of it, what we talked about, does allude to it. What level of this capability is needed in product managers? We talked about Pari left by saying, how many of you guys can code? I'm not so sure that's the right answer for a product manager versus what Rajiv just said. Where do you index your product managers? Anyone?
See, at least in our case, I think we don't have one profile of product managers. There are at least 2 or 3 very different profiles. We have product managers, who are kind of more kind of tech-driven. We have product managers who are more kind of business-driven. But generally, my very initial comment of at least product managers for us being this kind of water which flows and fills the cracks. For us, product managers is the juggler who's managing multiple balls.
But are you looking at this as 2 different personas within product management? Or are you looking for all of this in one person?
I think we end up, it's very difficult to have everything in one person.
Okay.
So I think we end up having, 2 type of product managers. But generally, our kind of product manager is the juggler. He's the mini CEO. He's also probably this annoying character, who's, maybe not the kind of, master of everything, but like, he's, jack of all trades is maybe not is a maybe harsh way of putting it, but, knows something about, many areas and is pushing people. So, it is not just that product tech guy. For us, I think over the last 12, 18 months, the product manager has evolved to be a lot more of being the general manager and a lot more of being the mini kind
So
of
you're
CEO.
indexing on the more on the business side of it rather than the tech side of it. So you're not, your product managers are not at the risk of now having to learn to code.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think
Okay.
that's fair. I don't think that's the characterization or that's the only way we are looking at product
Well,
managers.
I guess a appreciation of deeper technology is good, but you really don't have to get to that level where you actually code.
Again, for different parts of the organization, you
You have
probably
different answers.
Yeah, because if you are looking at the product manager for our search, or the product manager for our data platform, probably does need to have very deep kind of tech roots. But a product manager for our marketplace for our retail kind of for offerings, probably needs to be a lot more business oriented.
Okay. Rajiv.
So slightly long-winded answer, but so be it. So I don't think the product manager needs to worry in the next 3 to 5 years. Nothing is going to happen. But I have a feeling that with the power of what started as A/B and now has moved to AI, literally doing 3, 4 A/B tests now with systems coming in, and you can now do hundreds of A/B tests at the same time. So what the product managers focus on data can literally be replaced by the system, because system understands data and system can show you 100 different things to literally say which is the best for who, right?
Okay.
So all that part of product management will very soon be replaced, right? Which essentially leaves you with the creative part of the product management. Because if the system, and I don't think product managers need to code. Product managers will be poor coders, and there are much better coders who can code. So I don't think you need to do anything that you're poor at. You would rather go hit a 6 in the thing that you're strong at.
The creative side.
And for me, that is creation. When I say creation, it's design, the field of design. In India, it is so difficult to find great designers and great product managers. And last 4.5 years, I've done so many interviews and so many conversations. It is just difficult to find because there don't exist too many. And if people can develop that skill set, including my own self, I would say, that would be super useful. To the skill set of intuition. 3 is the skill set of just going so deep into customer insights that you'll actually put Silicon Valley guys in shame, right? And again, these are 3 which require a huge amount of effort on this side. To that extent, I would just say there are enough people who can do the data part of it and all of that stuff. This is the skill set that's completely missing.
So you said 3, right? One is design,
one is
customer
design, one is
insights,
intuition, one is just
intuition and
super deep customer insights.
Got it.
I'll take a slightly different perspective on this. Again, it will be a slightly longly winded answer. So what we are talking about is a couple of things, right?
Well, you can give me a long answer, because my next question was, why do we need product managers? But looks like none of us are going in that direction. At least Rajiv has confirmed that in the next 3 years, job security, at least in some form, exists. So you can take the time. Yeah.
All right. So the question is that we are talking about focus. We are talking about metrics and all. So focus. Let me ask the question. Given how rapidly the industries are changing and everything is going towards the consumers, right? What is the job of the product manager? Can I just ask the audience that question? If you have to just say the product manager has one job, one metric, what is it?
You're asking?
I'm asking, but I'll give you the answer. In my opinion, the product manager is the father of the product. Just like father in the family, your job is to help the kids grow. If the kids don't grow, you have zero value in the family. You better not be the father, right? So what is rapidly becoming today is product managers are becoming growth managers. That's something that's...
becoming what?
Growth managers.
Growth managers.
So it got started by Facebook. Chamath was sort of the father of that 6-7 years back started. And if you look at every successful company that you can name, Tesla, Uber, Airbnb, they're actually, the product managers are not becoming obsolete, but they are becoming, they're getting replaced, or they're transforming into growth managers, which is to say that, look, now that all the toolkits for handling the data that's available to you, there used to be data managers in this company 5 years back. But now what Rajiv said, all the toolkits are becoming quickly available to run hundreds of A/B tests, right? And that sort of gets getting automated. What do you do? What's your job? Your job is your mission statement is just one sentence. Your job is to grow the product, otherwise you don't exist, right? And there, the question of how you do it, combining your intuition, your design ideas, your ability to understand the market, all of that comes into picture. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be measured by one metrics, that's growth. Otherwise, it should not exist.
I have 2 points here. First point, very small point, sorry. The feminist in me wants me to call that the mother and not the father. The second point is, I think we as product managers, and I'm a product manager for a long time, before I put on this hat, doing a wider role, we all think that we are this thing of the product and we are the owner of this and that. And, honestly, I think it's a bit too much of a horn on the head thing in my mind, because if you really want to build great products, you will get ideas from every single place. You better have your skill set on those three things to take calls. You are an evangelizer. If you want to build great products, you might as well take that one idea from that engineer to make sure that person is motivated, but at the same time build something fantastic. And, I've been, part and parcel of that whole, hallucination that, we are the thing for the product. I think it's, it's just a whole load of too much in our mind. For me, if we can focus on those creative skill sets, which are just lacking in this market, absolutely brutal, honest truth, we would do far better job of creating much better products than what Silicon Valley does, but I think we are far from it.
I think
Can I just add to it?
a rejoinder. I cannot feel like I'm sitting between Trump and, No, but that's good. That's good for our, what is the rating, right, Ram?
Really, yeah, Rob is getting the best rating. I'll tell you, I told you half the sentence.
Yes.
The whole sentence is the product manager is the father, and the engineering manager is the mother of the product.
Oh,
she's the one
you missed that part.
builds the crap out of the kids, the engineers. So the father provides the growth thingy, right?
He's got a role for the mother there, right?
Yeah. Hold on a second. The growth thingy, he provides the impetus, the ideas, and all that stuff. It's the mother who gets to do the job.
Look at that. I mean, this is fantastic. It's like one.
The feminist in me still completed it.
So this is one big Vasudeva Kutumbam, right? So it's like, by the way, the politically correct in me tells that we should characterize that parent. So, but good. I think that's good fun. I do see the family part of it there. Sridhar.
So Bala, I'm not going to put you on the spot by asking who Trump is here. But anyway, so I don't think that product management role is going away anytime soon. So if you look at it, the way things are evolving, you need to build products that people can use, right? That's essential, the job of a product manager. But also being the glue between all those different functions and teams to, ship the product and kind of make sure it all comes together. So that glue piece, importance of that cannot be understated. Second thing is, when we hire, or when, our opinion, when you hire, you basically hire with skill set that allows the product management to do their job. Means excellent design, or eye for where the market is heading and things like that. But, if you take wartime and peacetime, we wouldn't be hiring specifically for a wartime PM versus a peacetime PM.
That's
I think
correct.
in that sense, your product managers have to be adaptable to kind of fit into any kind of a scenario, be it wartime or peacetime.
Well, I mean, that's true, and it's quite complex, like what Rajiv said. This is a very complex skill set. So one takeaway that we can all let out a big breather. Our jobs seem to be reasonably secure, and we don't have to code. So to that extent, I still don't know why you want all this data from him. We need to focus more on the business and the creative and the intuition side of it. I think all of them resonated that aspect of it. So my next question is, if you were to redo the job description of your product manager in your company, what would you be looking for? Nitin?
I feel pretty comfortable with the job description. I think the challenge is, what Rajiv said, that do we really have enough product managers, who have the required skill sets? Because, being able to understand the consumer deeply and then translate that into a product vision is a very tough thing. That calls for, a certain level of consumer intimacy, that calls for strategy, that calls for also tech understanding. And I think that to me is the bigger challenge. I don't think the challenge is per se the role of the product manager.
Do you find enough? I mean, do you have?
I think it's a very difficult one. In a company of 40,000 people, the 150 product managers are our most precious and difficult kind of skill set.
Okay.
We I think of the 150, we've probably grown 50% from within, and 50%, we have probably got from outside. So I think that to me is the bigger question. I think this whole question about do we need product managers, or I think that to me, I don't even get the question.
So what do an aspiring product manager should do today to actually prepare for this?
See, I think having a range of experiences, because I do see the role as a general manager, somebody who needs to have multiple set of skills, and I think at least in our context, the main job is connecting the dots. It is not so much of a functional specialist as somebody who's able to understand, take the customer context, where the company wants to go from a strategy perspective, and turn that into something, which engineers can work with.
So you would index on breadth over the depth?
Yes.
Okay. Rajiv, what's your view on?
I think 70 to 80% would still remain in terms of just the job description.
Okay.
Wise, I don't think any of that would change. I would just add a bunch of things that I was talking about. Because a product manager fundamentally is a problem solver, and they're just very customer oriented, right? So all of that is anyway already part of the job description that you see outside also. I'm not as aware of, let's say, a platform or a B2B kind of a setup and how that's different. Hardly done much stuff there, but I would say just purely in terms of just taking those longer term bets, the field of intuition, the field of evangelizing, because to some extent, while it's there, it just becomes so much more difficult, specifically in wartime, to evangelize and say, I need to do this big bet, right? And you have to take that responsibility to say that, hey, I will do it, and if there is a failure, I'll take the, I'll take the blame for it also. So I think just the ability to do that and to take those calls is probably for me a very strong addition to it. And pretty much everything else is covered, just that I don't think we focus enough on fields
so
like
this is another part, right? So you need to be team player, but at the same time you need to be alpha in a certain sense. You have to go against the grain and you have to take bets and all that. Where do you index?
I think it's, again, this particular one is a very company culture thing.
Okay.
As long as the product leader is part of the leadership team and he or she works enough with everyone else, because a great product without great marketing is anyway a dud, right? A great product without the business economics is anyway a dud. So to that extent, as long as the product person is a part of the leadership team, the other leaders will respect product decisions from this person. To that extent, the alpha person is required because you have to take those strong calls. And as I said, the ideal leadership team is when the leaders take those calls, not the founder, not the CEO, right? It's the leaders who take those calls. It's just that very specific surgical strikes time when we'll have to take some of those calls, but that's just exception, not the rule. So to that extent, I would say a very strong personality is required.
Is required, okay. Shantanu?
I think Nitin covered 70% of it. Rajiv covered another 25%. I'll just add one more
No,
thing.
you can cover another 50%. Growing the pie, right? So
growing the pie. No, I just had a couple of questions, a couple of points for, if there are PMs in this room who are aspiring to be great PMs. One, so these are tactical stuff. Understand how data and stats are used in your field. Data is going to consume the world. You're not going to go escape from it in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Even if there's very little data used in your field, think about how it could be done and what role it can play. Number two, be obsessed about things. All of us have seen the best product managers.
what did you say, number two?
I said be obsessed about things.
Okay.
The good product manager, the best in the world, I see are obsessed about products, not only their own product. I remember the most engaging discussion I have ever had on a product was with a Facebook product manager. It lasted 3 hours on how we can better design a water bottle. They're so obsessed about it.
That's interesting.
And by the way, there are many ways you can improve a water bottle. So look at things around you. How can that table be improved? The water bottle, right? The way you watch movie, how that experience can be improved. And if you're obsessed about things, if you're constantly thinking, you will end up seeing a lot of the lessons and the learnings from other industries actually translate into your product. You'll be surprised how many of everyday experiences translate into your product experience and a consumer experience eventually, and enriches your product. So those are the couple of things I wanted to say.
Excellent point. Nitin, you had something to say?
Yeah,
Before I go to Sridhar.
Yeah, just reflecting on this alpha male and team think point, and I think in our evolution. I think we have experimented with kind of different models. We've certainly gone through a phase where we had like, alpha kind of type of model.
Okay.
And, we are almost kind of orienting the entire company and the entire P&L, around the product. And I think with mixed results.
Okay.
I think with mixed results. So, because, if you have the alpha, then there is also, you have to be able to play the part. If you are not in a position to play the part and then you are trying to act the alpha, it can be disastrous. I think the other thing that kind of happens is that if the product management becomes, or the product manager becomes too dominant a personality, it can end up, kind of pushing the engineers into a bit of a corner. And I think that's a bit of a, because we want our engineers also to be creative. We just don't want them to be coders. Yeah, so I think we certainly saw that playing out.
Okay.
That over positioning product, also we saw had some negative consequences.
Got it.
And so what I agree with is that given that the product manager is the person in the middle, his or her ability to drive decisions has to be very strong. But at least what we are finding is that the need for kind of teaming and collaboration is very, very high. Without that, you may end up creating a lot of conflict.
Got it.
Can I take just one sidebar to it? It actually ends up defining the company's culture. If you look at the buckets, right, there are 3 types of companies that I can roughly say at least in the valley, right? The product-driven companies. Example is Facebook, Uber, and Airbnb. There are engineering-driven companies that are great. Google and Tesla, right? Great engineering companies. The engineers drive the culture, product managers don't. And then there are design-driven companies like Apple. So you got to pick your, pick and choose your model. It eventually gravitates towards one of the models. What it does is that eventually it makes the very clear what the decision points lie. In Google, product managers don't necessarily drive the engineering. Engineers drive the experimentation, the engineers drive the first beta, first alpha, and so on. And eventually product managers take over and figuring out the finesses of it. In Facebook, it's the product managers that drive every decision, and engineers, help them essentially conquer the market. In Apple, I have heard, until the reflectance from the edge of the surface is decided by the designers, you don't get to build either the engineering or the the products behind it. So it depends on what type of culture you're
Okay, makes sense. Sridhar?
Well, apart from all the other things that have already been said, the other 2 things that I would like to, add to a product manager's, description is, one is no size fits all, right? So every product manager has a different personality. But the key thing is they are what we would call an obstacle remover.
Okay.
So there is this goal you're trying to get to with the product, and there are several obstacles. It could be either in engineering,
how you navigate
through that, both internally and externally.
Externally, yeah.
To get to that goal, right? So in that sense, that ability to become this glue becomes critical. The second thing is also having, one thing is you have to check in your ego at the door. And the product is above everything. So if the person is able to do that while having his convictions or her convictions on why this decision should be done this way, that way, also listening to others, but then using others, as an input, as well as using all the technology that is available to help take that decision is what, we look for.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. I'll open it up for a couple of questions, and I think we are at exactly at the time where we need to close it. Any questions, comments here, folks? Yeah, there's one person.
So all this war and peace analogy, right? So it looks like when you are at war, your competition is at peace because he is done striking you, and now it's your turn to strike back, right? So it looks like reaction strategy, right? You react to what others have done to you, and so have you guys thought about any preemptive or proactive strategy?
He talked about it, right? Sridhar talked about the Zoho. It's more of a, they looked forward and then they built their cloud strategy. That's, he said, like preparing for war, isn't it? Anybody else? I'm sorry, I'm speaking on your behalf, but okay. I thought that was a syllabus covered already.
Well, I would ask to Rajiv that
whoever is
said
speaking,
that,
if they could stand up, I
sorry?
really don't know who's speaking.
Yeah, I'm speaking. Actually, the cameraman was off. Okay, so
you're
I
behind
would
camera.
like to ask Rajiv that you just said that we are far away from being creative. So why do you think that the market is not creative right now, and how to breeze that? Like Prisma, and what is about the sustainability? Like Prisma, they disappeared. They were creative, but they disappeared like faster than Duronto. So.
Yeah, for me, it's not about just creative in terms of just, creating short-term apps or, even Pokemon to that extent. But for me, it's about bridging that okay, two things, right? One, from just the field of design, we're just more nascent, right? It's just a status of the ecosystem. Silicon Valley is 45 years old, we are 10 years old. So there is a maturity of the ecosystem that has a big input into the number of designers and the way digital design happens here. And there are ways to accelerate it, but that requires a lot of intervention of too many different parts of the society, right? From education institutions to government to all of that stuff. So it's pretty difficult to accelerate it. There are ways to accelerate it, but it's not that easy also. So I don't have answers. I know that we need a lot more thinking on design, right? Two, in terms of just the field of intuition, again, it's probably the kind of confidence, and it goes back, in my mind, at least to the education system in India, the way confidence is built into people in terms of right from communication and putting forward a case and bunch of those kind of things. Which probably international schools today are trying to do in India. And again, it goes back to a very fundamental thing in terms of 10 years later, I think the Indian startup ecosystem will be very different, right? Because it's continuously, crazily growing, right? This is the first 12, 18 months when all of the companies are going through funding situations which are very different. We have just never handled some of this, right? Silicon Valley has gone through so many busts and stuff. So I would say all of this doesn't have too many accelerated answers, unfortunately. We just know that some of these problems persist, and you just have to be a cutout. You just have to chart your own path. Again, there are no answers. You just need to be spectacular in these 2-3 fields. And if you are that, you'll just build the next product. You'll build the next, I don't know, Prisma is probably a bad example. Then Instagram, you'll just build the next Instagram. So I would say there is unfortunately no answer or no, other than these structural reasons why it is this situation. India will be in 20 years probably where Silicon Valley was in 30 years at that time. So, so the future is fantastic. You just need to all align and make sure that happens.
So this actually has got a corollary to it. Given where we are somewhere in between, I think. There is enough but not enough kind of situation, and we're going through a lot of skilling changes. Do you, when you look for product managers, do you hire to the JD, or do you look for a good raw material and then you build around that? How do you guys approach it? Rajiv, maybe
I
you
think
can
I think he should answer it probably better.
No, you go ahead with it.
I think it depends on the state of the company and the size of the company.
That is a given.
If you have a mentorship system in the company, then you can hire fresh and then groom.
Okay.
It also depends on your priority at that time. If you're in super war time, it becomes tougher to do that. You want someone. It also depends on the mix, right? If you already have a bunch of generalists who are doing that, and you want people with experience, then you will go for people with experience. So I think it's a mix of a variety of
all
factors.
over the place. Nitin?
I think the most important thing that we look for, Bala, is just problem solving, problem framing skills. I think that's the most important thing, and very difficult actually.
Okay.
And even in problem solving, the ability to zone down on what problem to solve for. The problem framing skill,
that's even more
in the
tougher.
problem solving life cycle is the most important thing for a product manager. So a lot of our process for evaluating product managers, both at an entry level, and we kind of take them through a kind of a special program, and people that we hire at a more kind of lateral level. I think we tend to over-index heavily on the problem solving, problem framing skills.
Got it. Yes, Shantanu.
So given everything else is equal, problem solving abilities, having some intuition, having worked in the tech and all of that, the first thing that I index on is what I just call the passion or obsession. If they don't love products, because a lot of times what will happen within your engineering org Engineers think that product management is cool. They see a bunch of guys going around talking about products, going to conferences, all of that stuff. So they want to become product manager. So you interview them, and the first thing you look for is, do they have the passion? Have they thought about product in their life? Any product. Water bottle, right? A good example.
Interesting.
If they have not, and if they don't have the passion, and if they cannot say or articulate why they want to become a product manager, that sort of raises at least a yellow flag in our process.
Sridhar?
Well, we've always believed that nobody's born with certain knowledge, so any skill can be trained, and that's worked well for us. So I would say 100% of our product managers have been in-house groomed. They learn by seeing their seniors or their peers, and then they try it out. There are cases where they found out that product management is not for them, and then they move on to a different role.
Got it.
But the basic ingredient is pretty much the same. So if you look at our own transition from OEM telecom to enterprise IT to cloud computing, these are the same set of people who built product for these 3 different types of industries. And they just adopted to a different type of domain, a different type of problem to solve, but the basic skills is pretty much the same.
Excellent, excellent. Sounds good. Great perspectives. Ravi, you hold the key here. Should we close down? Yeah, we can close down. All right. So just want to take a minute. In the last 3 questions, I hope you guys were really paying attention, because the last 3 questions really unwrapped what the future in the next 3-4 years for product managers, if you're aspiring for a career in it or if you're already in it, would entitle, right? So there were lots of words that came out, which to me was very useful. I hope you guys got it. It's all about the intuition, problem solving, passion, and problem framing, actually. That's even bigger skill. And please don't go and start joining in Coursera and learning programming languages. Focus more on obsession with your customers, your markets, the antenna part of it. I'm missing many of the other words which came out. Anybody have any words that I missed out? I'm sure I've missed out. Obsession. Growth, yeah, the growth. What else did you get out of it? Single word. Don't give long answers like the way these guys gave. Huh? Sorry? No. Whoa. I don't want to go there. We settle for parent. Yeah, parent, yes. What else did we get? Team player versus, it's a fine balance between the team player versus, alpha. I'm glad you got that sorted. All right, any other words which came out? Sorry? Big bets, yeah. Look forward and big bets. Sorry? Creative, yes, that's right. Design and the creative. Journalist? Generalist. Okay, sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing from here. Deep consumer thinking. Glue, yes, yeah, absolutely. That one came out, yeah. Good? Sorry? Stats, yeah, data or stats. But I hope we are landing this in a very positive note that we all have job security, right? So, of course, but it's a very new game altogether, and how you use our AI. We've had the previous session which talked about how data and the AI is changing the landscape, and how product managers need to use that as a tool to solve problems creatively, with passion, with intuition, all that for the market. Any closing thoughts? Did I miss out any words? Are we good? Cool. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to each of you. By the way, a lot of what happened here was unscripted. And I'm sure these guys are going to bash me up outside because we prepared certain questions. I had completely ignored all of it.
One last question. Did Ram's rating go up today?
Did Ram's rating go? No, but all this wouldn't be possible if not for Ram's. Ram has been in this ecosystem for a long time. He has mentored many of the folks here, and Ravi is actually carrying that baton right now. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you everybody for sticking around and making this a fun and interactive session. And thanks for Nasscom for putting it all together. Thank you. We'll see you around. If you guys want to catch up offline, please do. Thank you.
If I may just request the panelists to just stay on stage for a second.
Stay back.
May I request Bala to hand over the souvenirs.
Ram.
And let's give them a big round of applause. Let's reconvene at 11:45, please. Thank you.